So, as we were talking in the last lesson, climate short stories are very powerful tools. Let us continue with that they are about raising awareness of environmental issues. Many of these issues depict the consequences of resource depletion, pollution, and biodiversity loss, making these issues tangible and personal. Bacigalupi's depiction of water scarcity in The Tamarisk Hunter and Chiang's exploration of biodiversity loss in The Great Silence highlight specific environmental problems in ways that statistics or scientific reports might not. So, this is the thing about literature which we have been discussing right from the beginning of this course. Literature is powerful as a tool to deal with the impacts of climate change, to inform about climate change, to talk about solutions, because it humanizes those issues. It makes those issues tangible and personal, so it can reach the readers easily. So, it's different when there are statistics or scientific reports which do not get uh, to the people so easily, or they are not so easy to understand. But in story form, they are able to reach the readers, and we can say this when we talk about the two systems of education, the Western system and the Sufi medium of education. The American Sufi Idris Shah has talked about this in his book The Sufis and in other books. Uh, he talks about the fact that the system of education, the Sufis, is one that is through stories. And the stories, in a very subtle manner, they are able to change the consciousness of the learners, especially young people. So, Sufi teaching is not done by rote learning the way it is in the West. It is storytelling which changes the consciousness of the reader. So, this is exactly what the climate change fiction stories do. They, they change and they shape the consciousness of the reader, and they make them aware, and they make them aware of their connection with nature and the environment, and thus they are enabled and empowered to reconnect with the environment and to sort of do things to mitigate all the damage that has been done to the environment so far. So, by providing immersive experiences, these authors help readers understand the complexity and the scale of environmental issues. So, this is also important. Scientific terms and numbers which talk about the scales of environmental damage and disaster do not register so easily on the minds as when they are emotionally charged through stories. So, the complexity and the scale of environmental issues that registers more easily on the consciousness when it is delivered through stories rather than through hard, cold facts. The stories encourage empathy for nature. Climate fiction often fosters empathy by showcasing the impacts of climate change on non human entities and marginalized human communities by offering perspectives from characters affected by environmental degradation, or even, as in Chiang's story, from the perspective of animals. Authors encourage readers to see the world through the eyes of those most impacted by climate change. This emotional engagement helps readers to develop a more holistic view of climate responsibility and motivates them to consider their own roles in environmental uh, preservation. So, the idea of empathy for nature, of communicating with nature, again, this is there in folk tales and even in uh, religious stories and in religious anecdotes. Uh, they are there in the Bible, they are there in the Quran also, and various other religious texts. And for example, there is the story of the Prophet Muhammad, of how he had seen a deer that was weeping, and the hunters had caught this female deer, and then he asked the deer what the matter was. She replied that she had not fed her brood of babies and just wanted to feed them and come back. Now, when he told the hunters to free uh, the female deer and that she promised to come back, they would not believe him. They were very amused at this. But they allowed her to go, saying that she would not come back. So the deer went to its babies, fed the babies, and came back. And when she came back, the people, the hunters, were shocked beyond words. So these are such anecdotes and uh, parables from religious literature that that inspire us, and that tell us about the non-human world and our connection with it and our responsibility towards it. So such parables, they encourage empathy for nature, and there are various parables related to Buddha also, as well as other saints. And in India also, we have known a number of saints, and there was the story of one of our saints who had seen a wild elephant on rampage, and people were running helter and skelter because of that wild elephant, and it had great fury and madness about it. But the moment it saw this saint, it lowered its head and became calm. So you can see that this connection of animals has with animals and humans has always been there. And then these parables of saints, they tell us about the empathy. We also have the uh, anecdote, the parable, the example of Shankaracharya, whose mother would not let him go into the world of uh, uh, renunciation, would not let him go, and then a crocodile got his leg in the water, and he said to his mother, "If you don't let me go, then the crocodile will take me. So, mother, give me permission." So as soon as she gave permission, the crocodile let him go. So you can see that our religions, our cultures within various countries are filled with these uh, parables and anecdotes and stories, folk tales, folklore, where humans and animals communicate with each other, and there is an empathy for nature. Inspiring reflection on human values and behaviors. These stories invite readers to reflect on humanity's tendencies towards consumption, exploitation, and disregard for nature. By presenting cautionary tales that highlight the long term consequences of unsustainable behavior, authors like Atwood and Saunders push readers to question their own values. Such reflections can motivate readers to adopt more sustainable lifestyles advocate for policy changes, and become more aware of ethical dimensions of climate action. So, this is the effect of being inspired by such stories. One can understand what a sustainable lifestyle is, one can advocate for policy changes, and one can become aware of the ethical dimensions of climate action. One learns from the stories of day-to-day life, and readers, the writers can deal with sometimes very small and ordinary events, and show how uh, they may be very strongly connected with climate impact or climate change. So these writers force us to reflect on our values and our behaviors towards nature. They promote climate action and a sense of responsibility. While many climate fiction stories are cautionary, they also offer hope by suggesting that awareness and change are possible. Robinson's optimistic stories often depict societies actively working towards climate solutions, illustrating how collective action and innovative thinking can address environmental challenges. These portrayals empower readers to believe in the potential for meaningful change, and the role that each individual can play in climate action. So, there's a promotion of climate action through the inspiration of hope, through showing the way forward, through showing them uh, hope that change is possible, and change will happen when it is done collectively. So, here are examples of short stories with messages for environmental action or sustainability. Some climate change short stories conclude with an urgent appeal for sustainability or responsible stewardship of nature, inspiring readers towards environmental action. And here are some important examples. A Fable for Tomorrow by Rachel Carson. So, as we already mentioned, Rachel Carson was a scientist, but she had a very beautiful literary style of writing, um, and it was a captivating style of writing. So, when she wrote about science, or when she wrote about the universe and abuse of the uh, environment, it was not put in difficult to read terms. Her text is very beautifully written and very expressive, and it's very easy to understand. Carson's story describes the progression from lush prosperity to desolation, serving as a dire warning of the ecological consequences of chemical use. The message of the story is, by demonstrating the possibility of environmental devastation in a relatable setting, Carson's story stirred earlier in environmental activism, contributing to policy changes in chemical regulation and influencing readers to adopt eco friendly practices. So, you can see the impact that her writing had, and her writing was based on science, as she was a scientist, but it was impactful writing which humanized the issues that she was dealing with. And thus, she managed to impact public policy and government policy, and also impacted readers enough to take action. The Siphoners by David Mitchell. In this dystopian story, David Mitchell imagines a future world plagued by environmental collapse, where climate refugees known as siphoners migrate to marginal lands. The story delves into water scarcity, social disparity, and haunting reality of survival in a world depleted of natural resources. We can see that these ideas come up again and again in climate fiction stories, and they are very impactful because they give us a picture of what the future could be like if we reach this stage. The message is Mitchell ends up with an urgent reminder of the critical value of water and the importance of sustainable resource management. His characters, affected by water scarcity, prompt readers to question the ways they use and value natural resources. So, we can see that the message is here asking you how you utilize these resources, these natural resources, uh, and how you use them, how you utilize them, and how do you get them. So, interestingly enough, if in ancient times people went and bought water directly from the rivers or the seas, or waited for the rain to collect water, or went to the ground wells, nowhere was this system hinted at. The present day of technology and the present day of the market and the shares and the values of those shares, all that which sort of confounds our relationship with nature. So that's why this question is there: how do we use natural resources? Natural resources were there in ancient times when human beings were using them, and they are there today. But today it's a very confounded logistics with economy, with technology, with marketing and things coming in between. So the products of nature are no longer pure, and they do not enrich us in any way. They do not uh, give us the nutrition we need, because it is all processed, and industry has turned it into things that will not do our bodies good. So you must have read news in various places about the RO water that we drink. It is depleted of nutrients, whereas the water, the groundwater that we are polluting with chemicals and pesticides, that is the water that is right for us, with the right chemical composition, the right composition of minerals and micronutrients. So that is lost, and so when we drink the RO water, it is pure, sanitized, clean water without chemicals, but without micronutrients that our bodies badly need to combat disease, to stay healthy. So we can see what industrialization is doing to us, and these stories are talking about it, how natural resources are being used and abused by us. Another one, Diary of an Interesting Year by Helen Simpson. This story talks about a future devastated by climate change through the entries of a diary. Through the narrator's reflections and struggles, Simpson's work underscores the importance of proactive environmental policies and lifestyle changes, encouraging readers to take climate change seriously before it leads to irreversible consequences. So, here is a different mode of storytelling through diary notes, and which becomes quite personal and very engaging and captivating, this form of storytelling. And then the message is reflecting on the policies and the lifestyle changes we need to make to mitigate climate change impact. So, how does literature influence personal and community level changes towards climate conscious living. Stories about climate change often have a unique impact because they speak to readers on an emotional and psychological level. Through literature, the abstract concepts of science become personal, tangible, and relatable. Here's how climate fiction, especially short stories, can promote climate conscious living. So, we know in ancient times, when we have read the works of Kalidas, or we have read other ancient stories from ancient Hindi or Sanskrit literature, or perhaps Greek literature. um, what were the dwelling places of people? People didn't always live in the way we live today, in the concrete houses that absorb heat and are unlivable in summer, and are unlivable in winters because they become cold and they need artificial conditioning, artificial change of temperature. What about those old houses, that sustainable kind of existence that we read about in ancient literatures? So it was there in those stories. The mud houses were there, and these houses made of natural material were cool in summer and were warm in winter, and people had plenty to eat. Their surroundings were clean, so they lived in a climate conscious world, and the nature, the the fruit or the vegetables, the food that they got, that came directly from the fields. There was no marketing and economics in between. No one to deliver. It was to get something right from your neighborhood. So these were things that were what we will call climate conscious living. The way water was used, there used to be wells which were never dry at that time. It's only now that most of the wells have gone dry. There were no pesticides, so one was at the mercy of God. If the crop was saved, it was saved. If it was not, it was the will of God. But other than that, in ancient times, people learned to live with nature, and they led a climate conscious life. Unlike today, we have a kind of plastic existence. So, literature tells us about all these things and wakes us up to the stark realities of our time. We are living a plastic existence, and we should do something about it to stop this plastic from entering our lives and our bodies. Empathy and personal identification with environmental issues. Stories allow readers to experience the effects of climate change through the eyes of relatable characters. By building empathy, literature makes climate change more than a scientific problem, it becomes a personal challenge. So, this is important. The stories are humanized uh, science, humanized climate science, or personalized human science because they're delivered through relatable characters. So, instead of being scientific problems or scientific facts which are far and distant, they become a personal challenge. Helen Simpson's Diary of an Interesting Year takes readers into the daily hardships of a person facing extreme climate conditions. Readers who identify with the narrator's distress might feel a greater sense of urgency and about climate issues, encouraging them to adopt eco-friendly habits like reducing waste or conserving energy in their own lives. So, they are these diary entries, these stories by Helen Simpson in the form of a diary are very powerful, and they stress on the reader to adopt eco-friendly habits like reducing waste and conserving energy in our own lives. There's an illustration of consequences and a reminder of responsibilities. Stories can vividly illustrate what a future shaped by climate neglect might look like, making readers consider the consequences of their actions. When characters in stories face food shortages, societal breakdown, or water scarcity, readers may become more conscious of their consumption patterns. The what if scenarios of climate inaction in these stories serve as a reminder that small everyday choices that we make, like reducing plastic use, conserving water, using public transportation, collectively impact the environment. So, these what if scenarios can have a tremendous impact on readers because they talk about everyday things in life, reducing plastic use, conserving water, using less electricity, using public transformation, keeping the area clean. So, these all reduce the impact on environments. So, I'll stop here and we'll meet in the next lesson. I hope I was able to communicate the power of short stories in climate fiction. Thank you.